So I'm Susan. Welcome to the online community meetup. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I have a couple little announcements, and then we'll get on our way. For those of you who don't know, you are in TechSoup. TechSoup is a nonprofit technology organization. We've been around since 1987. You can see on the back wall, there's a little timeline. We were formerly called Compumenter. We've been in this neighborhood the whole time, and I've been at the organization for 14 years. And I was hired initially to launch TechSoup, but then I moved into community, and then I moved into a new organization, which is a new division of TechSoup called Caravan Studios, which is where I now work. Caravan Studios, you can see in the back there's a big banner that says Safe Night, which is strategically placed to prevent you from walking to the rest of the office. But it also, I have some cards that have to do with Safe Night. Safe Night is, Caravan Studios is the newest division of TechSoup, and Caravan Studios makes apps for social benefit. So we're not making apps for specific nonprofits. We're making apps, we talk to a bunch of nonprofits, and we're making apps that solve issues that help organizations. So Safe Night was made, we talked to human trafficking organizations, and we talked to domestic violence agencies. And we found out that a similar problem that both of them had is that when there is no available shelter beds, they have to often send the victims back to their abusers. What they do in certain cases is they pay for a hotel room for a cooling off period. But with budget cuts, it's unfortunately become very difficult for domestic violence organizations to do that, to fund that. So we built this crowdfunding app called Safe Night, which is for people like you and me to put on your phone, and here's the card where you can get the QR code, or you can just go into, hi Gwen, you can go into the various app stores and put it on your phone, and we are in a pilot phase right now for Safe Night, and when there is a call, it is a real call. So when you get a push notification on your phone, there is a real victim that needs a hotel room right then and there, and you can help fund it. So actually saving lives with apps, it's amazing that can happen. Another app that we have that is actually, as of today, in the Android market, and it was as of yesterday in the Windows Phone market, and it will be, as we know with lovely iPhones, it can take a while till an app gets live there. They just randomly, opaquely decide when they make it live. So, but if you have an Android phone or a Windows phone, the other app is called Range. And Range is to help find a free meal near you for youth. Because on any given day in California, there are hundreds of thousands of unclaimed free meals. And it's not just schools. There's a school lunches program, but in the summer, when school's out of season, places like Boys and Girls Club and YMCA give out free food, and these meals are unclaimed. And there's kids that are going hungry and eating Snickers bars. So it's a big issue. So this Range app, you can actually also put on your phone. All of this is available at caravanstudios.org. You don't have to remember anything. Just go to caravanstudios.org. The Twitter account is at Caravan Studios. The other Twitter account is at Safe Night App. These are our individual Twitter accounts. I don't think I said enough about TechSoup, I just realized. So just quickly, I told you that we've been around since 1987. I told you that we're a nonprofit technology organization, but what I didn't tell you is that we have a big, what we do that funds the rest of our programs is we have a big product distribution channel. So big vendors like Microsoft, Cisco, Symantec, Adobe, Intuit, and hundreds of others give us product, and we passed it along for 95% off of retail, 5% of retail to nonprofits. So if you know nonprofits and they aren't signed up with us, it's a super great program. They can save a lot of money, and then that social enterprise within our organization funds the rest of our programs because we are ourselves a nonprofit. Tonight we have that girl Crystal of Ning, and she's a community manager, and she's going to be talking about big changes in your community and managing them. This is the TechSoup Twitter handle. This is my Twitter handle. I want to thank my volunteers at Susan_Chavez. Susan Chavez is right there. She's been with us for a long time. At Time Doctor is Zachary, our video guy, and he's awesome. At Gregory Go is our other video guy, and he's right there. Scott Moore is volunteer. He's right there. Say hi to him. Mark Siegel, another wonderful volunteer, is right there. I don't have Ravi's Twitter handle on, but Ravi's the nice man at the door. Ravi, you could tell us your Twitter handle if you want, or tweet it out. And Scav is Matt Fairchild, who's not here right now, but he's What? Okay, I missed that tweet. He's on his way. Wi-Fi information's on the wall. Pretty easy to read right there. And all of you should know that this is the hashtag to be tweeting on. And then you get to show up here. And also, everyone who is listening remotely can see your tweets. And also, everyone who's watching remotely can read your tweets. So we have a recruiter in the house from TechSoup, Sue Madigan, who wants to make a little announcement about some open positions. And then I'm going to let you guys, if there's other people in the room that have open positions and people, I'll do the little hand raising thing. So here's Sue Madigan, TechSoup's recruiter.
Yay! Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I am working furiously to find great talent for TechSoup Global and to really bring a lot of the techies over to the nonprofit world. We had a great article in the Chronicle this week about really adding value to your life by what your livelihood is bringing you. So anyway, that was really positive for a recruiter like myself in the nonprofit world. We have a couple openings right now. We are looking for an associate product manager, a portfolio product manager, a developer that is a manager for NetSuite, and that's a white tiger and a needle in a haystack. But if you know where that white tiger is, please tell me. And we've got a great, this is kind of on the grant writing side. It is a manager for philanthropic investment. So those are some of the openings right now, and we've got more to post this week and next at TechSoupGlobal.org /jobs. And thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. So talk to her if you are looking or interested in those. Is anyone in the room looking for work? Raise your hand. Wow, lots of community. Really, Zach? That's interesting. You learn something new every day. Lots of community managers. Keep your hands up for a second. These people are all smart and looking for community manager jobs and other jobs too. And does anyone have a position to hire? Mark, do you want to make a quick announcement?
Yes, I work for a company called Demand Force. I'm hiring for a mid to senior level community manager to do kind of community manager stuff, build up leaders group, and some other things. So either talk to me after or apply online.
And for those who are watching online, it's at Mark Siegel has a mid-level community manager job for Demand Force. Sorry, mid to senior. I remembered most of it. Is anyone looking for gigs as opposed to jobs? Yay, Scott Moore is. You should talk to him. And so is Randy. Anyone have gigs, like consulting gigs to offer up? Okay, that's it. Thank you all for listening. And with that, I'm going to pass it to the glamorous, that girl, Crystal Coleman, and let her tell us about managing big change in a community, which is super scary.
Thank you, Susan. Maybe I shouldn't stand right in front of the projector. I should, Good? Okay, perfect. And then I'll still be able to do my slides. Okay, so you're at OCTribe. That's OCTribe. That's hashtag OCTribe. Everyone has to like step up their Twitter game here because I tweet way too much usually. So you gotta step up the game. Tweet. Do it. Okay, so we're going to talk about managing big changes today. And I'm kind of going to look at this from a disaster preparation standpoint. So we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. So just basic, why the heck should you listen to what I have to say? I've been doing community since about 2006. I started with Wet Paint, which was a wiki company, building up the followings and the participation there, and encouraging users to come to new wikis. That was part-time there, but I did it for about 5 years, I think. My day job at the time was at a theater, so I've got nonprofit and performing arts deep in my soul, and I brought that community management into my day job because it made it a lot more fun to be an office manager at a regional professional theater. And since then, I've done consulting, I've done social media account manager roles, all sorts. And right now I'm at Ning. I started there about a year ago as a consultant, mostly on the content side, and I moved into the full-time community manager role in November. I tweet way too much usually at That Girl Crystal, so if you need my Twitter. And my name's Crystal Coleman. I just realized I didn't actually put that on any of these slides. So that's my name. And I am originally from Gainesville, Florida, home of the Florida Gators. So the Gators win everything in my bracket. Go Gators. So tonight's agenda, we're going to talk about what exactly is a big community change. We're going to go through some planning tips that you can, from disaster preparation, that you can utilize in planning for community changes in your community. And then we're going to look at 3 practical examples of how you can utilize these best practices. And we're going to look at what these examples did right and what these examples did wrong. And I don't know everything. One of the things I really love about the community manager profession and the community manager community is that we can all learn from each other, whether we've been doing this for 6 months or 6 years or 16 years or 60 years. That's not a thing. So if you have any comments or suggestions or addendums that I'm not covering, feel free to chime in during the presentation, or you can wait till after. We'll have some time for questions afterwards. And feel free, if you're following along on Twitter, if people are asking questions there, feel free to bring that into it as well. So I'm going to follow along with my notes a little bit here. Hopefully you don't mind. So change can take many different forms. We've got platform, which can be user-facing. It can be back-end. It can be changes to an internal platform, or from one platform to another, switching service providers entirely. A big change can be design. Even something as simple as a logo change can be really upsetting to users. Something in management, changes in moderators, changes in a company that provides the home for the community. Change in policy, moving from open to closed, from closed to open. That's a huge change because people may have said things in confidence. Restricting membership or opening it up. Those are all changes. And business direction. So changes can result from business decisions, but have an end user impact that you really want to think about. So these are going to be your basic steps when you're making community changes that I've identified. So these are the 4 things you want to keep in mind. And we're going to look at these from a disaster preparedness perspective. So just like when you're preparing for a natural disaster, there's some essential planning elements that you can put into place that's going to make a transition smoother. But at the end of the day, something unexpected will always come up. So you have to not necessarily plan for the unexpected, because you can't really plan for the unexpected, but expect it. So this first point, be informed. A lot of this is going to happen before you actually make any changes. Whenever possible, you want to really proactively involve your community in the changes that are happening. You want to reach out to them, seek information, seek feedback from them, and having a small group of community members that you can rely on for constructive, honest, actionable feedback is really key here. So that's something that if you don't have it in place, you should start building it now, because at some point, some change is going to affect your community. And you really don't want to put this in place once the change is already in progress, because then it seems like you're just kind of using them. You want to put this in place. You want to give to this group, this trusted group of community members before you take from them, before you ask their feedback. Once the change is actually made, you want to make sure that you're providing avenues for feedback, both good and bad. And then you want to actually act on that feedback. You want to show your work. You want to show, okay, we heard you say X, Y, and Z. We're going to provide you with easier ways to do Y and Z. Maybe we can't provide you with X, and here are the reasons why. You want to provide avenues for that. Next up is your communication plan. Yeah, Star Wars, thank you. I like it. So if you're not thinking about a communication plan when you're thinking about changes, you need to rethink the fact that you're thinking about changes, because you're going to need to communicate these at some point. And so you need to be thinking about how this communication is happening. So depending on the change and depending on your community, you want to think about what kind of communication plans you're drafting as well. Are you just drafting an internal communication plan? Do you just need to communicate this change to your community? Is it just something that's going to affect them, or is this something that's going to affect a broader customer base, perhaps, that is not very active in your community, but is still going to be affected by these changes? And that's more of an external communication. Some basic things to remember when drafting a communication plan is that the community should always come first. Whatever communications you're sending out, your community should get the news first or simultaneously if they can't get the news first. If it's something that you're worried about leaking, something like that. The people that are involved in your community are the people that are super invested in the community. And they deserve to get this information first. I would even go so far as to say you have an obligation to give this information to them first, or at the same time as it's been announced publicly. Otherwise, you'll get a really bad response. People don't like finding out news like that from TechCrunch or Recode. They want to find out from you. You want to also think about how you're crafting your internal versus your external communications. So this is where voice and tone is going to come in. Whereas it might be really okay for your marketing people or your legal people to draft your external communications, as much as possible within reason and liability, you want to keep the legal people out of the communications that you're sending to your community. Because legal people, the legal team will tear every drip of humanity out of your communication. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. But that's not your job. Your job is to be that human face of your community. And then you also want to look at it with empathy. You want to look at this communication from a member's perspective. So what are your community members going to worry about? What questions are they going to have? This change affects them, and they have absolutely no control over it, or at least they're going to feel that way. Even if you're making avenues for feedback available, they are going to feel like they have no control over it. So you want to really think about it from their perspective and how it's going to affect them. It's still, it's not going to change the decisions that need to be made at the end of the day, but even something as simple as acknowledging, we understand that many of you may be upset by this. Here are the reasons why we're doing it. Can go a long way to help tamp down some of the upset that can come from changes. So once you have your plan, you want to build your kit. You want to build out your plan. You want to build out a frequently asked question. That's the first thing that's going to come to mind, because whenever a change is announced, you can't announce every single part of this change in a single announcement. There are going to be extra questions that arise because of an announcement. So you want to build a dedicated frequently asked questions, and you want to revise this as new questions occur, as things change, if you are taking some feedback into account and changing things about it. Canned responses get a bad rep, but canned responses are your friend, with a little bit of editing to make them sound more human. You don't want to send the same canned response to everyone. You don't want to comment with the same response to everyone, because especially when you're commenting in a row, everyone can see that it's the same thing. Add a hi in there. Add a hi so-and-so. Add a thanks for your comments so-and-so. Anything you can do to make it a little more personalized and make it evident that you have spent more than the 2 seconds that it takes to control V this. But they're your friend, because at the end of the day, people don't read. So no matter how much you cover in your frequently asked questions, those questions are still going to be frequently asked. That's why they're called that. So you're still going to have to answer those questions again and again. Yes, Carrie. So the question is, how do you build a frequently asked questions document if the questions haven't been asked yet? And that's a completely valid question. Generally, you as a community manager are not the one instigating a change. Usually it's the product team, the marketing team, the engineering team. It's usually coming from somewhere outside of you. So the first thing I like to think of with a frequently asked question is, what are my questions about this? What questions come to mind instantly from my perspective, even though I know stuff about this product, I know stuff about this property, what are the questions I have? So start noting those down. Then step outside yourself and look at it from a user perspective. If I were coming to this completely brand new, what questions would I have? So for example, I'll get into this a little bit more in the practical examples, but Ning recently released migration tools for moving your network from Ning 2.0 to Ning 3.0, our current platform. We were seeing a lot of similar questions. We weren't really capturing these questions in a good way. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a guide to our users for setting up your network post-migration. So what I did was I basically took one of my test networks and I migrated it to a new network. And I've been hands-on. I haven't been migrating as much as like the advocacy and support team has, but I've been taking the initiative to get at least one migration in there, so I'm familiar with this process, so that I can explain it properly to our community. So I went through this process from beginning to end, solely looking at it from a community member, from a network creator's perspective, saying, okay, so I've got this migrated network. Where's my stuff? Okay, this is where my stuff is. This is what I need to tell them. Okay, now I look at my network. It looks terrible. None of my customization is there. Okay, I need to tell them how to go to the customization and walk them through that. So any opportunity that you have to erase your knowledge from your mind as best as you can and look at it from a completely fresh perspective helps with those FAQs. And then also working with your support team and seeing what questions they're getting. So those are kind of the 3 ways I have. Does anyone else have any other suggestions for how they build out an FAQ? Susan? Nice. That's a really good suggestion. Look for things that are similar or changes that are similar or platforms that are similar and see what those, just like we all do when we're creating community guidelines. No one writes community guidelines 100% of their own. Like, let's be real here. We all look at like Flickr's community guidelines or Yelp's community guidelines. Like, we look at that and then we adjust from there. So doing that with FAQs is a great way to go as well. Scott, did you have a? Yeah. So you'll start getting those questions as soon as you post announcements. And that's where, keeping your FAQ updated, even just as simple as putting an updated date on it to show that you're actively participating in that FAQ. Did I see you, Lagaya? Did you have it? Okay, what Susan said. And so Then we get to the worst one, the one that's hardest to deal with, is that sometimes there are going to be unpopular changes that your community is really unhappy with. And as best as you can, be transparent about this. Be transparent about the reasons behind it. And make sure that everyone on the team is on the same page. So from your support staff to your engineers to your product team to the C-suite to you. Everyone should be on the same page about why this is a good decision for your property at the current juncture and why it's not changing if that's the case. And then at the end of the day, there's always going to be unexpected stuff. So having staff on hand for a rollout is obviously preferable. If it's a big product rollout, if it's a big infrastructure update, your engineering staff should be there supporting you. You should have a direct line to them to say, listen, the community is freaking out about this. It's not working. We need to fix this right now. It's not ideal to have a bug during a big launch. Not ideal to have a bug during a lunch either, really. But if it's handled in a quick and efficient and transparent manner, it can, it won't steal your thunder. It won't take the air out of your launch. So just remember at the end of the day for your own sanity that no matter how much planning you do, some things are going to be beyond your control. If like a huge news story breaks and this launch that you're really excited about completely fizzles because this news story took precedence, you got to just wash your hands of it, try to get in the news cycle next week, and just move on from there. Just breathe. And be flexible. That goes along with that as well. Flexibility, that's what we all do as community managers. We're 1 minute we're talking to people within our community, the next minute we're writing a blog post, the next minute we're answering a support ticket, the next minute we're filing a bug report. Like you're all over the place. So just remember to keep being flexible with these changes. And if you have the opportunity to advocate for your community when a change is unpopular and to really voice those concerns to upper management, take that opportunity. The worst that can happen is they say, no, we're going to stick with this decision. And the best that can happen is you've really made a lot of people's day just by voicing your opinion and just by doing your job as a community manager and being that advocate for your customer or your community member. So those are the basic things to remember. So now we're going to look at some practical examples, and we're going to look at what went well and what did not go so well. This is Hurricane Charley. I originally had the idea that this presentation would be structured around the idea of a hurricane. Because in a hurricane, I grew up in Florida, so I'm familiar with those. You have the outer bands that are kind of lots of rain, really scary, but preparing you for what's to come. You have the actual hurricane, which is, when all the shit goes down. Excuse my language. Then you have the eye, which is really calm and really serene. And you're like, we got this. This is all good. And then you get the other half of the hurricane. And inevitably, like every change I've seen, every change I've been through or helped to manage, there's inevitably like a period of calm and then stuff blows up again. And so that's where I originally got this idea from. And Susan was like, how about you expand it to more like general disaster prep? But so this is my one hurricane slide. So for practical examples, I work at Ning. Ning has had 4 really big changes in the course of its history. I'm going to look at a couple. The first really big change was the decision to remove porn networks. The decision to make the terms of service that, I know, shucks. The decision to make it part of the terms of service that we would not be hosting adult content, which was very unpopular with a very small section of customers that were very happy to have a free resource to post their porn on. So that one, you know, obviously we knew that was going to be unpopular there. The second big change was moving from a freemium model where you came and you could build a free network. And many of you were probably on free Ning networks or had started free Ning networks. And in 2009, so it started as a free-based product, and then you had options to purchase additional add-ons, permissions. You could remove the branding. You could have more members, things like that. You could add third-party apps. After a CEO change in 2009, the new management took a look at the company and determined that that really wasn't a viable model for Ning going forward. So we ended the freemium model and went to a completely paid structure. So that obviously that's a big change when people are getting something for free and suddenly you say, hey, you know, this thing you really love and you really spent a lot of time working on, can you pay us for it? It's rough. It's something that has to be handled really delicately because these are people who have invested so much time, so much emotion, and so much money, not necessarily to Ning, but to designers, to third-party applications. So what we did right, we didn't get to address it to the community simultaneously because it was leaked at the time, at least from what I understand. I was not with Ning at the time, but from what I understand, it was leaked. A memo that the CEO sent out was sent to someone, which is always fun. But we addressed it as soon as we could. Part of the big changes that were happening were internal. A lot of people were being laid off, including the community manager at the time, who is Laura Gluganich, who you may know. She's like a legend in the community management field. And she has her own business now. So she's doing all right. But she was laid off as part of this. So as part of this communication, since we weren't able to get out ahead of it, we announced it to the community. And we were upfront about the fact that layoffs were included in this. And said right in there, we kind of did a plea for empathy on our part and said, you know, our thoughts are with the people that are not coming back tomorrow. So we're gonna take the rest of the afternoon to regroup. We won't really be responding. We won't be present because we're gonna take care of them and try to find them jobs. I think from my perspective as a community manager, I think that's one of the things we did right. You know, some people may have seen that as a bad thing, but I would rather be part of a company that does care about their employees, even when they're having to lay them off, than one that's like, oh no, business as usual, you're fired, but can you still manage this crisis that's happening? Yeah. Another thing that we did was we instituted a mini plan that was much cheaper than the normal plans. And we did this for education purposes. Because we were a free platform, we had a lot of teachers and a lot of educators, a lot of high school teachers, college professors, setting up Ning networks for their classes, for their communities, for their schools. So we instituted with Pearson Education, they sponsored some free mini networks. And then we also had a mini plan that was open mostly for education. I think we opened it up at the beginning and then closed it down a little bit. So that was all good, but we definitely did some stuff wrong. So what we did wrong. So when we announced this plan, we announced it without any specifics. So we basically said, we're gonna end free networks, but didn't actually tell them what was happening or give any payment details. So we just delivered bad news and caused anxiety and uncertainty without any concrete information. And part of this happened because we were forced into this position to because of a leak of a memo. But it's really something that, even beyond your purview as a community manager at a CEO level, you should really implore that things like this be thought about before memos go out. Because the fact of it is memos get leaked. Especially if they involve layoffs, people are going to be pissed. People are going to send it to TechCrunch. And whenever it's a memo, it gets posted on TechCrunch because that's the story. Yes, Mark.
Were you just days away from putting your questions?
I don't know. Because as I wasn't around at this time. So most of this is from looking at historical documentation and talking to Allison, who I think had just started at the time, and looking at some of what Eric had written and some of, obviously the historical posts that are still there. I think it was at least a week before we had anything out, which is too long. It's way too long. Yeah. So that was that change. And then we were still there. And then a couple years later in 2011, we were acquired by Glam Media. And that was a smaller change, but still an important change to a certain extent, because a lot of people had some concerns, because Ning is this place for community, this place for where everyone can build a community around their own interests. It's a very, very happy, everyone hug. Like that's what it is. And it still is. The Ning team is still very everyone hug. So there were concerns about it being acquired. Just like, I see all this news about Facebook acquiring Oculus. And I think you were, Casey's rolling his eyes. I agree with, I saw Casey say something the other day that was as a community manager, I'm averse to knee-jerk reactions. Those are Casey's words, quote him. So it is. You can understand from a community perspective why it's a knee-jerk reaction, but it's come on, it's not going to ruin everything, and it hasn't. And in fact, by 2012, around midway 2012, about a year after we were acquired by Glam, we were really taking a hard look at the platform, and we decided that Ning, as it stood, needed to go. It was dated. The old school Ning sites were starting to look really dated. They weren't responsive. They had to have a separate mobile version that lacked all of the functionality of the network. And as we know, more than 50% of traffic is coming from mobile nowadays. So having those users getting a lesser experience is not good. And then on an infrastructure side, it had been around for a while. It was costly, it was inefficient. It really needed a revamp. So in spring of 2013, just about a year ago, we announced the plans for Ning 3.0. So we did learn some lessons from the way the end of freemium was announced. And Allison, who's the community manager at the time, ran test groups. She consulted with a network creator council, which the Ning Creators Network has existed pretty much since the beginning of Ning in one form or another. It was on our own platform at first, moved to Get Satisfaction for a little while, and then came back to our own platform where it's been since 2009. So she gathered together groups of these old school network creators to get their feedback on these changes. She gathered together groups of community influencers to get their feedback on these changes. So these are not Ning users, but people that we potentially really want to know about Ning, especially since we're having this new look, this new responsiveness. And we had information ready to go. Obviously, questions still came up along the way that we still needed to consult on. And a lot of what was initially planned, we ended up changing. We took some of the feedback And we came back to our network creators and we said, we heard your feedback. Here are the changes we're making as a result of it. So one of those things was Ning 3.0 goes to a member limit base for the pricing rather than a function base. Everyone gets the same functions. And your price is determined on your community size. So as you grow, yeah, your price grows, but your activity is probably going to grow. It's going to cause more of a server load. It's going to cause more of a space load, things like that. So it makes sense. So one of the things we did was we doubled these member limits for existing customers. So anyone that's migrating in this process will get those member limits doubled for being an old school customer. I forget some of the other changes. My mind's blanking right now because I'm on the spot. So that's what we did right. I think those are things we did really well. What did we do wrong? We set dates. When we announced Ning 3.0 in March of 2013, we said that it would be feature complete by the summer. Right? And obviously, it ended up being a bigger project than that. We set these really ambitious goals. We didn't meet them, and we got called out on that by our community. They were like, hey, you said this was going to be done. It's nowhere close to that. You said we were going to be able to migrate by the fall. Where are the migration tools? So in December, before we went away for Christmas break, I made a point to get together with our support lead and our product team and put together, basically, I was calling it internally a mea culpa and saying, you guys are right. We set these really high expectations. We underestimated how much work this would take, and we did not meet those expectations, and we were wrong. So this is what we're going to do from now on to make communication of this better. And so we instituted a few ways that they could easily see what the progress was. We instituted a couple of new feedback venues. And we said, and this wasn't popular, but we said, you're not getting dates anymore. We would love to give you dates when things are in planning, when they're about to be released. We'll do our best to give you a date. But we just cannot give you dates because priorities shift, teams shift, and we can't give you dates this far out. That's what got us in this mess in the first place. And yeah, okay. The next thing I'll mention with the next slide. So that's Ning. Next, I want to look at a change that I wasn't directly involved with. This is a company called Causes. You probably, since this is a highly skewed nonprofit group, you probably supported at least one cause on Facebook. They were one of the 10 original Facebook apps. They have that distinction. They started in 2007. And by 2012, they had over 186 million users that had supported various causes. And at this point, they decided it was time to branch out into their own platform. They didn't want to live on Facebook anymore. They wanted to own those users. They wanted to own that information, rightly so. You got almost 200 million users. I want to own that too. So I talked with James Rogers, who was the community manager at Causes at the time. And we had a really great meeting with him before he went on a trip around the world, which he's on still at the moment. And they had a really interesting way of doing this. They did a ton of communication ahead of time. They sent out, I think, about 4 emails total leading up to the change. So they sent out general emails. They sent out, when they got closer to the changes, they sent out emails explaining, this is what you're used to doing, this is how you do it now. When they actually instituted the change, they sent out targeted automated emails to let people know what specific changes affected them, and then specifically prompt them to review and publish their new information on the new platform. They hired interns to help them out through this, so that they could offer 40-hour-a-week chat support throughout this transition. And everyone from C-level down was involved in this chat support. So they had this staffed 40 hours a week to answer questions, to take feedback. I think that's amazing. I would love to staff 24-hour chat support. It would be a dream. But you know, obviously, it sounds like they did everything really great. There are a few things they would have improved. When they sent out a relaunch email, they sent it out to everyone, and they got a lot of bad response to it, a lot of spam reports, a lot of spam complaints, which if you are familiar with sending out emails on behalf of your company, you know, are not good things. So he would suggest that if you're seeking to re-engage people, target them separately, target them in smaller groups, target them in more meaningful ways than a general blast relaunch email. And he would have really liked to do more onboarding. I think this is something we can all relate to. I think we all say like, oh God, like if we could just explain this to them as they're going through the process, this would be amazing. We should have thought of this before. So that's one thing I've taken to heart in the changes that we've been doing at Ning. And I've, working with the support team as well, we've really tried to make, and we still would think we could and would like to do more onboarding. But we're really trying to put an emphasis on that and on answering those questions proactively before they're asked. And the main thing that James said that really stuck with me was that the end user experience was much better than the experience for their leaders, for the people that had started these causes. And I think that's something important to remember, because when you're, at least for me, also working in a community platform, when you're working very closely with the people who are running a platform, for example, they're going to notice more about it. They're going to be more unforgiving about it. But if you can make the process as seamless for the end user as possible, then it's going to be better for your customers as well, if there is a customer in between you and the end user. So that's maybe not applicable to everyone, but I found it useful. Does anyone have any questions while I take a drink here and sort out my notes? So the setting up your network post-migration is one of the onboarding pieces that we did. We also developed a what to expect when you're migrating, which kind of goes through the process on the back end before they even get to the migration, to basically detail out, okay, you want to migrate. This is awesome. Read through this. This tells you what does migrate and what doesn't migrate. If you think you're a really good candidate from that, awesome. Send in your request from this form. You've sent in your request. Great. You're going to get a confirmation email. Reply to that confirmation email. We're doing this because we want to make sure you're actually you. After you get that confirmation email, we're going to work some magic on our end, and we're going to transfer all your stuff over. And then we're going to get back to you, and we're going to ask you to review this. Here are some of the ways that you can review it. Here's some of the things to look out for. So how do you get the first? Through our community. Through our community. So we opened up our migration in a few points. We had a sandbox group that got free Ning 3.0 networks that have been going on for about a year now. So they've been having an additional network. It's a test network, limited to members, limited to, they can't domain map it. Things like that. It's meant just for them to really get familiar with it. So we opened it up to, well, first we were really just taking migration requests from people who were super, super interested, who were coming to us saying, I want to move me, please, please. So we were taking that first, letting them know full on they're beta testers. Things are going to be rocky. We're going to be learning from this process. Then we opened it up to the sandbox group. And we got, I think, about 15 to 20 requests from that. And then we opened it up widely. And I think we're around 100 requests for migration. And we only announced migration a couple of weeks ago. So that's pretty good. Especially since we don't have like end user stories to tell yet. But that's the stage we're in now, is we're collecting those end user stories of members who have been through the migration process. And we're asking them, what went well? What could we be doing better on? How did you communicate this to your users? How did you communicate it to your admins? Things like that, that other network creators would be interested to know, and that would possibly put them at ease if they're thinking about their own migration. So the next practical example, and then we're done, pretty much at least. So the next practical example is wet paint. Wet paint started in 2005 as a WYSIWYG wiki company. We're all technical people, so editing Wikipedia for us might be no thing, but if you're not technically inclined, like Wikimedia code is really confusing, and you just don't know how to do it. So their vision was to be a place where someone could create their own wiki for a family, for an interest, for a TV show, for a hobby, anything, for a business. And people could come to it and could easily contribute to it because it basically looked like a word processor, and people understand word processors. So they soon realized that the niche that they really connected with was entertainment. So where I was brought on to wet paint, I actually was a moderator of a wiki about Lost. That's how I was brought into it. That ended up being acquired. Yeah, that ended up being acquired as the official ABC Lost wiki. They had other deals. I worked on an HTC wiki, so they had little technical details. I didn't really know what anything was talking about at the time. There were these phones you could touch, and I was like, that's crazy. That's never going to catch on. Clearly, I was wrong. They had deals with entertainment networks like HBO, Showtime, Fox. So I also worked on Dexter, that official wiki. That was fun. That was really a challenge because I didn't have Showtime, so I couldn't avoid getting spoilered. I'm working through season 7 right now. That's how far behind I am. So because of they did really well in this entertainment niche, they shifted to being an entertainment publishing platform. And they shifted away entirely from this original wiki product. So what did they do right? Well, they didn't just close down the product, which would have been a viable option. It would have really sucked for the people who had spent years building wikis on the platform. But what they did wrong was they did let the product just kind of flounder for a good couple of years before it was eventually sold to WikiFoundry and rebranded entirely as WikiFoundry wikis. And then they didn't really communicate that at all. I wasn't with them any longer. I was done with them by this point, but they didn't, and that's not why. But they didn't really communicate that to their users at all. They let WikiFoundry do all the communication there. They may have not cared at that point because these weren't the customers they were going for any longer, but it's not the best thing to do. It's not in the best interest of your users. This is kind of continuing the weather and disaster theme. So you've got the storm, the hurricane, and now the rainbow after the hurricane. So summing up, so change is ultimately good for the most part, but it's really scary, especially if you feel you have no control over it. So you want to really think about it from that perspective and try to be as empathetic as you can. You also want to over-communicate as much as you can and be okay with saying the same things over and over again, because the person that's asking the question this week maybe wasn't even on your community last week when you made this announcement, and they're still freaking out just as much as the people who were freaking out last week when they found out about it. So you've got to continue running through these communication plans. And you want to be as transparent as possible. And that actually can become an asset and can help mitigate some of the potential negative feedback that you're going to get. And then you also want to understand that you're going to make mistakes in this process. And when you make a mistake, it's all part of the being transparent as well. Fess up to it. Apologize. Even if it's as simple of a mistake as giving wrong information. The more you appear human, the more people will understand you're human, and the more they will forgive you for being human. If you say, we're not going to let you do this, and you really meant, we are going to let you do this. Because as we all know, when changes are happening, things are crazy, you're typing really fast. And no matter how many times you look over it, a mistake might go out. So just, you will make mistakes, it's okay. Just fess up to it. So that is pretty much it. Do we have any questions? There is a wonderful feedback form. I stole this idea from Nir Eyal, who, if you haven't had the opportunity to see him speak, he's amazing. So go see him speak. He also has a book called Hooked, and it's all about building habits. And so he puts this feedback link at the end of his presentation. And if you fill out feedback, then you get the link to the slides. So go do that, and then you'll get the slides. And then I haven't had a chance to build out a lot of the resources yet, but there will be some resources up at that link as well. And these are linked to in the slides as well, and I'll throw it in channel on Twitter after I'm done up here. And then those are the ways to contact me. So questions, yes. Do we have a second mic, Zach? It's not working. Okay. Yeah, I'll repeat it. Yeah, I think in the case of, so the question is, how does this translate to open source technology? And would you prescribe the same tactics? And I think in general, the same tactics can be used to anything. Obviously, you want to modify them to fit you particularly, and not everything will fit you particularly. I think with open source, the transparency is key, because people who are really passionate about open source things are also really, really passionate about transparency. They want to, because they're oftentimes building things upon your open source technology and investing quite a lot into that building of it. And so if there's a change, it can affect their livelihood in a major way. So I think being transparent about it is even more important when you're part of an open source. And on the flip side too, if you're not going to be open source, or if you're going to move away from open source, sticking to your guns about that is good too, because the open source community is very vocal. I have a friend who is the VP of marketing at Zend, which holds PHP. They hold the copyright to the code for that, at least as far as I understand it. I don't really know entirely what she does. I hope you're not watching, Elaine. They occasionally got a lot of pushback from the open source community for not being open source. And they eventually just kind of came out and were like, look, we're not open source. We're not going to be open source. You can dislike us for that, but if you want open source, we're not for you. And if that's an important thing, you got to stick to it. I think I always err on the side of over communicate. If you think it could be dicey, then maybe bring in a lawyer. Especially if you're a public company, or if there are potential IPOs involved, then you may have to bring in a lawyer in your communications if it affects a major business direction. But for the most part, most of your communication with the community shouldn't. Good. Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, no, I was still taking questions. Sorry. Unless you need to kick us out. Okay. Okay. Yes. More questions. Yes, Gwen. What do you get in Ning 3.0 that you didn't get in Ning 2.0? I know. Do you have one of the sandbox networks? Have you tried it out yet? No. Okay. So the main attraction to it is that it is a fully responsive platform. So you don't need a special mobile version. All of the same functions are available on the mobile version. You can play with it. You can take your big browser window on your computer and you can move it down to really small to the size of a phone screen, and it's all there. It's fully responsive. If you had 2 columns, it shifts into one to fit. It doesn't turn into super tiny text. It's still readable. And this is really important because, like I said, more than 50% of traffic is coming from mobile now. And we've all had that experience of trying to look at a teeny tiny website on mobile, and it's terrible because you have to tilt your phone and then zoom in and scroll back and forth. So that is the main draw of it. It's more powerful in terms of privacy functions in that every single page, you can set the privacy of each page individually, and you can even set specific modules of content within a page. So you can put a box on your homepage, for example, saying, not a member, here are the reasons why you should really sign up. And that will only show to people that are not logged in members of your network. And you can have another module that exists in that same space that says, thank you for being a member, you're awesome. And that will only show to logged in members. Or you can have one that says, you're an admin, you're even more awesome, 10,000 brownie points for you. And that will only show to members in a particular category or members with particular permissions. So it's very, very granular on that effect. It isn't 100% complete yet. It's good. It's perfect for the majority of Ning networks. We have not finished the events function. We have not finished the chat function, but there are a lot of good third-party alternatives to that. And it looks a lot nicer. The design studio is much nicer. They don't look as Web 2.0 as some old school networks can start to look. Is that a good answer? Okay, good. Any more questions? Yes. We don't have a specific plan in place for that. Basically, it's, we don't support anything you go to someone outside of us for. We don't support custom CSS that you've added, especially if it breaks your network. We'll try and help you figure out what it is, but we're not CSS experts. So that is something that we're running into, both from a network creator side. Sorry, the question was, how are we working with or accommodating members who have invested a lot into design or customization of their networks? So we are working with solution providers to put together some dedicated materials for them, focusing on how do you communicate this change to your clients who may have no idea that this change is coming. And we're working on the same communications with network creators. We are able to move over some elements of custom code and some elements of design, but not everything, obviously. So we do understand it's going to be an investment for some networks to revamp their network. We don't have any plans for offering concessions to that in place, because to a certain extent, that's just the cost of doing business, is the need to update your website occasionally. But that's a good consideration and something we haven't really thought too much about. So I'm going to start thinking about that more. Great question. So the question was, when the feedback starts coming in, how do we figure out what is actually something wrong that we need to address and work on, and what is just someone that is unhappy with the change or is unhappy with some change in functionality? A lot of it is just not trial and error, but just knowing, okay, they're asking about chat. We don't have chat. We'll give them some of the other options that are available. They're asking about a music player, which we've decided to discontinue entirely. We'll respond with, unfortunately, because third-party services like SoundCloud do this much better than we do, we've decided to retire this product. So we recommend that you use one of those third-party services and embed it instead, which we do support. And then we just really look into it. So in this initial stage of migration, most of the migrations have been going super smooth, super easily. But there are always edge cases, which, and they always seem to come together. Like they're always, if there's one problem, there seems to be multiple problems that we're having to diagnose and figure out, okay, what was causing this? And I'll give you an example. We started migrating our own community over, and one of the bugs that was affecting a couple of our migrations was affecting our own. So we had to look at that as well and figure out, and having more data points gives us a better ability to diagnose the problem as well, because we can say, okay, what do all of these have in common?